Imagine a place where ice covers the land for thousands of years, where survival is never promised, and where nature, not people, makes the final decision. This place is Greenland, the largest island on Earth, lying deep in the Arctic, far from major continents, shaped by extreme cold, silence, and isolation. Here, ice is not just scenery. Ice is history, teacher, and judge. Greenland's story is not about rapid expansion, great cities, or powerful empires. It is about adaptation. It is about how humans respond when the environment offers no mercy and no shortcuts. In this frozen landscape, every decision matters. Every mistake carries a cost. Every success depends on understanding the land. In this lesson, we will travel through time, step by step. We will begin with the first Inuit hunters who learned to live with ice instead of fighting it. We will then meet Viking settlers, strong and ambitious, who brought familiar ways of life that the Arctic could not support. Their failure teaches a quiet but powerful lesson. Survival is not about strength alone. From there, we move into centuries of foreign rule, global conflict, and sudden modernization. World wars pulled Greenland into international politics. New technologies changed daily life. Old traditions were tested, but not erased. Finally, we arrive in the present, where climate change is reshaping the island once again. Melting ice, rising seas, and shifting ecosystems now connect Greenland's future to the future of the entire world. The past and the present meet here, on the edge of the Arctic. Throughout this journey, one truth remains constant. Those who understand the land survive. Those who ignore it disappear. This story invites you to listen carefully, think deeply, and see how human choices echo across centuries in one of Earth's harshest environments and remote landscapes. Long before Europeans knew Greenland existed, people already lived here, building lives in a place where ice, wind, and darkness shaped every decision. These people were the ancestors of today's Inuit, often linked by archaeologists to the Thule culture. They did not arrive with armies, cities, or written records. They arrived with observation, patience, and the ability to learn from the land itself. In one of the harshest environments on Earth, they created a way of life that lasted for centuries. The Arctic did not offer easy food or stable weather. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. Winter darkness could last for months. Storms and shifting ice made travel dangerous. Instead of trying to control nature, the Inuit studied it closely. They learned the behavior of animals, the movement of sea ice, and the rhythm of the seasons. Survival depended on knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Hunting was at the center of Inuit life. Seals provided meat, oil, and skins. Walruses offered food, tools, and strong materials for building. Whales, when successfully hunted, could support an entire community for long periods. Nothing was wasted. Every part of an animal had a purpose, from bones used as tools to fat burned for heat and light. This careful use of resources showed deep respect for nature's limits. Movement was another key to survival. The Inuit did not stay in one place all year. They followed animals in seasons, traveling when necessary and settling when conditions allowed. Kayaks were designed for Arctic waters, light and narrow, able to move quietly through ice-filled seas. Dog sleds allowed travel across frozen land, carrying food, tools, and people over long distances. Dogs were not just animals, but partners in survival. Housing reflected the same intelligence. In winter, igloos built from snow provided insulation against extreme cold and strong winds. Snow, when shaped correctly, trapped heat and created a surprisingly warm shelter. In summer, sod houses made from earth and grass stayed cool and protected families from changing weather. These homes were not temporary ideas, they were carefully tested solutions refined over generations. Clothing was another example of Arctic engineering. Inuit clothing was made from animal skins, layered and shaped to protect against cold, moisture, and wind. Fur faced inward or outward depending on the season. Boots, gloves, and parkas were designed for movement and warmth. In a land where exposure could mean death, clothing was life-saving technology. Time itself was understood differently. Inuit life followed natural cycles rather than calendars. The return of light, the freeze of the sea, and the migration of animals guided decisions. Patience was a survival skill. Waiting for the right moment often meant the difference between success and failure. This mindset created discipline, awareness, and emotional resilience in an unpredictable environment. Inuit beliefs also shaped behavior. Many stories taught respect for animals and warned against greed. Hunters were taught to take only what was needed and to honor the spirit of the animal. These beliefs were not only spiritual but practical. Overhunting could destroy future survival. Cultural values protected ecological balance long before modern environmental science existed. Inuit society was built on cooperation. Hunting large animals required teamwork. Food was shared, especially in times of scarcity. No one survived alone for long in the Arctic. Elders held knowledge and guided decisions. Adults taught children through observation and practice, not formal schools. Stories, songs, and rituals preserved history and values. Culture was not separate from survival, it was survival. Unlike farming civilizations that depended on stable land, crops, and fixed settlements, Inuit life was flexible. Success depended on adapting quickly to change. When animals moved, people moved. When ice conditions changed, travel methods changed. This flexibility allowed Inuit communities to endure where others failed. Modern science now recognizes what history once ignored. Inuit knowledge of ice, weather, and ecosystems is highly advanced. It is based on long-term observation rather than written data. Today, scientists studying climate change increasingly listen to Inuit communities, understanding that traditional knowledge holds critical insight into Arctic systems. In conclusion, Greenland's history does not begin with conquest or expansion. It begins with cooperation. Cooperation between people and environment, between knowledge and experience, between humans, animals, and ice. The first survivors of Greenland did not try to dominate the Arctic, they learned to belong to it, and that choice shaped the foundation of Greenland's identity. Around the year 986, a Viking named Eric the Red arrived in Greenland after being banished from Iceland. He was a skilled sailor, a strong leader, and a man searching for a new beginning. When he saw the coast, he gave it an inviting name, Greenland. The name was not meant to describe reality. It was meant to attract settlers. Eric understood that words could shape decisions, and many Vikings followed him, believing they could build new lives in this distant land. The Vikings did not come as explorers alone. They came as settlers. They brought cows, sheep, goats, iron tools, wooden ships, and the traditions of European farming society. They believed that if they worked hard enough, they could recreate the lives they had known in Scandinavia and Iceland. Farms were built along the coast, animals were raised, barley and vegetables were planted, churches were constructed, and European social structures were established. At first, survival seemed possible. The climate during the early settlement period was slightly warmer than later centuries. Grass grew during short summers and animals could graze. Trade routes connected Greenland to Iceland and Europe. Walrus ivory, furs, and hides were valuable goods. In exchange, Vikings received iron, wood, and cloth. For a time, Greenland appeared to be a successful extension of the Viking world. But the Arctic reality slowly revealed itself. Greenland's climate was never truly suitable for European agriculture. Winters were long, dark, and brutal. Summers were short and unpredictable. Crops often failed. Animals struggled to survive harsh winters, and fodder was limited. A single bad season could mean starvation. Farming demanded stability, but Greenland offered constant uncertainty. The Vikings relied heavily on livestock, which tied them to fixed settlements. This limited their flexibility. When conditions changed, they could not easily move. Unlike the Inuit, they did not fully adapt to seasonal hunting of marine animals. Although they hunted seals and fished, these activities remained secondary. Their identity and economy were built around farming, not Arctic ecology. Over time, the climate grew colder during a period now known as the Little Ice Age. Sea ice expanded, making travel more dangerous. Trade ships arrived less frequently. Without regular trade, Greenland's Viking communities lost access to essential materials. Iron tools broke and could not be replaced. Wood became scarce. Isolation increased with every passing decade. Contact between Vikings and Inuit likely occurred, but cultural exchange was limited. The Vikings did not fully adopt Inuit survival strategies, such as extensive seal hunting, flexible movements, or Arctic housing design. Their worldview remained European. They tried to make the land fit their culture instead of shaping their culture to fit the land. Historians describe this failure as an environmental mismatch. The Vikings were not weak or ignorant. They were skilled farmers, builders, and sailors. However, they applied a survival system designed for temperate climates to an Arctic environment that demanded a completely different approach. Strength, tradition, and determination could not overcome ecological reality. By the 14th and 15th centuries, Viking settlements began to disappear. Farms were abandoned, churches fell into ruin, written records stopped. No clear evidence of violence or sudden catastrophe exists. Instead, the decline appears slow and silent. Families likely starved, migrated, or died over generations. Eventually, the Viking presence in Greenland ended. Modern archaeology continues to study Viking ruins in Greenland, revealing stone foundations, animal bones, and tools frozen in time. These remains show effort, organization, and persistence. They also show limits. The Vikings believed land should be controlled, improved, and owned. The Arctic required observation, restraint, and humility. This difference in philosophy mattered. Where the Inuit adjusted daily life to environmental signals, the Vikings relied on inherited systems and social expectations. Change came too slowly. Greenland became a test that European medieval society could not pass. Their failure does not reduce their courage, but it explains their disappearance. Across centuries, this moment became a turning point in Arctic history. It demonstrated that survival in extreme environments requires cultural transformation, not simple expansion. Greenland acted as a mirror, reflecting the limits of medieval European thinking and the cost of ignoring local knowledge. In conclusion, the Viking story in Greenland shows that strength alone is not enough. When civilizations collide with nature, flexibility matters more than force. Greenland did not defeat the Vikings with violence. It defeated them with ice, isolation, and an environment that demanded change, patience, humility, and respect. This lesson remains relevant today, reminding societies everywhere that environments shape outcomes, and ignoring ecological limits eventually lead even powerful cultures toward decline and historical disappearance. After the Vikings disappeared, Greenland entered a long period of relative isolation. For centuries, contact with Europe was limited, and Inuit communities continued to live according to traditional systems shaped by the Arctic environment. This changed in the 18th century, when Denmark formally claimed Greenland and began to re-establish sustained control over the island. Unlike earlier encounters, this new presence would reshape Greenland not through sudden conquest, but through gradual transformation. Danish rule did not arrive with large armies or violent displacement. Instead, it arrived through administrators, traders, priests, and teachers. This approach is often described as soft colonization. Power was exercised through institutions rather than force. The Danish state focused on organizing trade, spreading Christianity, introducing European education, and building a legal framework that connected Greenland to the Danish crown. Change came slowly, but it reached deep into daily life. Christian missionaries were among the first representatives of Denmark. Churches were built in coastal settlements, and religious instruction became part of community life. Many Inuit converted to Christianity, sometimes by choice, sometimes through social pressure. New beliefs altered spiritual practices, but they did not erase older values. Respect for nature, cooperation, and restraint continued to guide behavior, even as Christian ideas blended into local traditions. Education was another powerful tool of transformation. Danish teachers introduced reading and writing, teaching both Greenlandic and Danish. Written language changed how knowledge was stored and transmitted. Oral storytelling remained important, but schools added new forms of learning. Literacy allowed Inuit communities to communicate with colonial authorities, access religious texts, and participate in administrative systems. Education became a bridge between worlds, rather than a replacement for tradition. Trade systems also reshaped Greenlandic society. Danish trading posts controlled the exchange of goods, linking Inuit hunters to European markets. Fish, whale products, and furs were traded for tools, weapons, cloth, and food items from Europe. This system created economic dependence. Inuit families increasingly relied on imported goods, which made life more convenient but also more vulnerable to external decisions and global market changes. European law and governance followed trade and education. Denmark introduced legal rules, taxation, and administrative boundaries. Local decision-making was reduced as authorities shifted toward colonial officials. Traditional dispute resolution and leadership structures were affected but not fully removed. Inuit communities adapted, learning to navigate new systems while preserving informal networks of cooperation and mutual support. What makes this period distinctive is not total cultural loss, but cultural layering. New systems were placed on top of existing ones. Inuit people did not abandon hunting and fishing. They continued to rely on seasonal movement, animal knowledge, and community sharing. The Greenlandic language remained central to identity and daily communication. Instead of disappearing, Inuit culture adjusted, absorbing foreign elements while maintaining its core. This adaptation was not effortless. Danish policies often misunderstood Arctic realities. Centralized control ignored local environmental knowledge. Economic dependence limited autonomy. Social changes created tension between generations. However, Inuit resilience showed again. People learned which elements of Danish culture were useful and which could be resisted or reshaped. Adaptation became a strategy of survival, not surrender. Over time, a unique mixed society developed. Danish architecture appeared alongside traditional housing. European holidays existed next to Inuit customs. Christianity blended with older moral codes, emphasizing balance and responsibility. Greenland became neither fully Danish nor untouched Inuit. It became something new, shaped by negotiation rather than destruction. This period laid the groundwork for modern political development. Literacy, administrative experience, and exposure to European governance later enabled demands for self-rule. The tools introduced during colonization were eventually used to challenge colonial control itself. In this sense, soft colonization produced unintended consequences. In conclusion, Inuit identity survived Danish rule, not because it resisted change, but because it adapted intelligently. Cultural transformation did not mean cultural erasure. Through layering rather than replacement, Greenland preserved its foundation while absorbing new influences. This balance between continuity and change allowed Inuit society to endure, preparing the island for future struggles over autonomy, identity, and self-determination in a changing world shaped by history and environment. In the 20th century, Greenland began to lose its isolation that had defined its history for centuries. What had once been a distant Arctic society suddenly gained global importance. This transformation did not begin with cultural choice or economic planning. It began with war. When World War II spread across Europe and the Atlantic, Greenland's geographic position turned it into a strategic prize in a conflict far larger than the island itself. Greenland sits between North America and Europe along vital North Atlantic routes. During the war, control of these routes meant control of supplies, communication, and security. Weather patterns moving across the Atlantic passed through Greenland, making the island critical for forecasting storms that could endanger ships and aircraft. For the first time, Greenland was not seen as remote or marginal. It was seen as essential. When Denmark was occupied during the war, Greenland was cut off from its colonial ruler. Into this vacuum stepped the United States, which moved quickly to protect Greenland from possible enemy control. American forces built military bases, airfields, radar stations, and ports along the coast. These installations allowed planes to refuel, ships to dock, and weather data to be shared across the Atlantic. Greenland became part of a global military network. The physical changes were dramatic. Airports appeared where only ice and rock had existed before. Roads were carved into frozen ground. Hospitals and medical clinics were constructed, introducing modern healthcare to areas that had relied on traditional methods and limited facilities. Electricity, machinery, and new building techniques followed. For many Greenlanders, this was the first direct encounter with large-scale modern infrastructure. The American presence also brought people. Soldiers, engineers, doctors, and technicians arrived from abroad. With them came new languages, customs, foods, and habits. Greenlandic communities that had changed slowly for generations were suddenly exposed to foreign influences almost overnight. Radios, vehicles, and modern tools altered daily routines. Communication with the outside world became faster and more frequent. These developments brought clear benefits. Medical care improved, saving lives and reducing the impact of disease. Transportation became easier, allowing people and goods to move more efficiently along the coast. Employment opportunities appeared, as some Greenlanders worked on bases or supported military operations. Wages provided access to goods that had once been rare or unavailable. At the same time, new challenges emerged. Greenland's growing dependence on foreign systems created vulnerability. Infrastructure was designed for military needs, not local priorities. Decisions affecting the island were often made elsewhere. Cultural change accelerated, sometimes creating tension between generations. Younger Greenlanders adapted quickly to modern technology, while elders worried about the loss of tradition and language. The pace of change was faster than anything Greenland had experienced before. For centuries, adaptation had been gradual, shaped by seasons and environment. Now, transformation was driven by global conflict and international strategy. The Arctic, once governed mainly by nature, became governed by politics and technology. Greenland's identity began to shift, influenced not only by Denmark, but by global powers. World War II also changed how Greenland was viewed internationally. Scientists, military planners, and governments recognized the island's importance for weather research, Arctic navigation, and defense. Greenland was no longer a blank space on maps. It was a key reference point in understanding the North Atlantic and the Arctic region. This attention did not fade when the war ended. In the post-war period, much of the infrastructure remained. Airports continued to operate, medical facilities served local populations, communication systems connected Greenland more closely to global networks. The experience of wartime cooperation showed Greenlanders that isolation was no longer absolute. The island had entered the modern world, whether it wished to or not. This period also planted early ideas of political change. Exposure to international systems and foreign decision-making raised questions about autonomy and control. Greenlanders began to see how global forces shaped their lives and how local voices could be lost without representation. The seeds of later movements towards self-government were quietly planted during these years. In conclusion, World War II marked a turning point in Greenland's history. The island moved from the margins of world affairs to a position of strategic importance. Modern infrastructure arrived alongside cultural disruption and dependency. Greenland was no longer invisible. It had become part of global history, permanently connected to the outside world by war, geography, and the forces of the 20th century. In 1979, Greenland reached a turning point that reshaped its political future. After centuries of external control, the island introduced home rule, granting Greenlanders authority over many internal matters for the first time. This moment did not arrive suddenly. It was the result of long historical processes shaped by colonization, modernization, education, and growing political awareness. Home rule marked the beginning of Greenland's transition from administration by others to governance by its own people. Home rule allowed Greenland to manage areas such as education, healthcare, culture, and local economic planning. Decisions affecting daily life could now be made by leaders who understood Arctic realities. Greenlanders elected representatives to a local parliament, strengthening democratic participation and political responsibility. This shift created a new sense of ownership. Government was no longer distant, it became part of the community. However, home rule did not mean separation. Greenland remained part of the Kingdom of Denmark, which continued to oversee foreign affairs, defense, and monetary policy. This arrangement reflected practical realities. Greenland's population was small, its land vast, and its location geopolitically sensitive. Complete independence would require resources and institutions that were not yet fully developed. Autonomy offered a realistic path forward. Over the next decades, Greenland's political confidence grew. Experience with self-administration strengthened institutions and leadership. Public debate expanded. Greenlandic language and culture gained official recognition, reinforcing national identity. Education systems emphasized local history and traditions alongside modern skills. A new generation grew up seeing self-rule as normal rather than symbolic. In 2009, Greenland took another decisive step by adopting self-government. This reform expanded autonomy significantly. Greenland gained control over natural resources, including minerals, oil, and gas. Authority over policing and the legal system increased. Greenlandic was recognized as the official language of government. These changes deepened political maturity and reinforced cultural pride. Self-government still stopped short of full independence. Denmark continued to handle defense and foreign relations, and it provided financial support through annual subsidies. This partnership balanced autonomy with stability. Greenland could focus on internal development while relying on Denmark for areas requiring large-scale infrastructure and diplomatic reach. Natural resources became central to political discussion. Greenland holds valuable mineral deposits, but extraction presents challenges. Harsh climate, environmental risks, and global market uncertainty complicate development. Control over resources offered economic opportunity, yet also responsibility. Decisions now carried long-term consequences for land, culture, and future generations. Self-rule required careful judgment rather than rapid exploitation. Climate change further shapes political thinking. Melting ice opened access to resources and shipping routes, increasing international interest in the Arctic. Greenland found itself at the center of global environmental and geopolitical discussions. Autonomy allowed Greenlandic leaders to speak directly in international forums, representing local concerns and perspectives. Political voice became as important as political power. Identity evolved alongside governance. Self-rule strengthened confidence in Greenlandic culture, language, and traditions. Modern political systems did not replace Inuit values. Instead, they incorporated ideas of cooperation, balance, and respect for nature. Leadership was increasingly defined by responsibility to both people and environment. Challenges remained. Economic dependence on fishing continued. Population distribution made service delivery difficult. Balancing modernization with cultural preservation required constant negotiation. Autonomy did not remove hardship, but it changed how hardship was addressed. Problems were no longer imposed from outside. They became shared responsibilities within Greenlandic society. Internationally, Greenland's status became clearer. It was not an independent state, yet it was not merely a dependency. It occupied a unique position within the Danish kingdom, shaped by geography and history. This flexibility allowed Greenland to adapt to global change without losing internal control. In conclusion, the journey from home rule in 1979 to self-government in 2009 marked Greenland's political adulthood. Autonomy provided space for growth, learning, and self-definition. By managing its own affairs while maintaining strategic partnerships, Greenland demonstrated maturity rather than separation. Self-rule was not an ending. It was a foundation for shaping the future with confidence, responsibility, and a clear sense of identity. Greenland's ice sheet is the second largest on Earth, covering most of the island with a vast frozen mass that has shaped life for thousands of years. Today, that ice is melting faster than at any known point in human history. In Greenland, ice has never been just part of the landscape. It has been a foundation of culture, survival, and identity. Now it has become a global warning, connecting this Arctic island directly to the future of the planet. Climate change is no longer an abstract idea in Greenland. It is visible in thinning sea ice, retreating glaciers, and changing coastlines. Traditional hunting practices are affected as animals move to new areas or arrive at different times of the year. Seal and polar bear habitats are shifting, making travel more dangerous and unpredictable. Hunters must adapt their routes, tools, and timing, often relying on experience rather than certainty. Knowledge passed down for generations is being tested by conditions never seen before. Coastal villages face growing risks. As ice melts and sea levels rise, storms cause stronger erosion. Homes built near the shore become vulnerable. Infrastructure designed for frozen ground must be rebuilt as permafrost weakens. Roads crack, buildings sink, and supply routes become unstable. For small communities, relocation is not just expensive, it is emotionally painful because land is tied to memory, ancestry, and belonging. Wildlife ecosystems are also under pressure. Fish populations shift as ocean temperatures change. Some species decline, while others arrive from warmer waters. This disrupts food chains and challenges fishing-based economies. Birds alter migration patterns. Plants grow in places once covered by ice. Greenland's environment is transforming in ways that affect every living system, human and non-human alike. At the same time, climate change creates new opportunities. Scientists from around the world travel to Greenland to study glaciers, ice cores, and atmospheric conditions. These frozen layers preserve climate records stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Greenland has become one of the most important research sites on Earth, helping scientists understand how climate systems respond to warming. Knowledge gained here informs global planning, policy, and environmental protection. Renewable energy is another area of potential growth. Melting ice increases access to hydropower from glacial rivers. Wind and solar energy offer alternatives to fossil fuels in remote regions. Developing these systems could reduce dependence on imported energy while supporting sustainable development. These projects require careful planning to protect ecosystems and respect local communities, but they offer a path toward resilience rather than exploitation. In this sense, Greenland has become a climate laboratory for the world. The island shows both the dangers of environmental imbalance and the importance of adaptation. The same principles that allowed Inuit communities to survive the Arctic for centuries remain relevant. Observation, patience, cooperation, and respect for limits are not old ideas, they are future strategies. Traditional knowledge plays an essential role alongside modern science. Inuit understanding of ice behavior, animal movement, and seasonal change offers insights that technology alone cannot provide. Scientists increasingly recognize that data and experience must work together. Solutions will not come from control, but from balance. Greenland's future will be shaped by choices made today. Economic developments must be weighed against environmental protection. Political autonomy must be matched with responsibility. Cultural preservation must adapt without freezing in time. None of these challenges have simple answers. Every decision, local or global, carries consequences that extend across generations, ecosystems, and borders, linking Greenland's fate with that of distant societies and future populations who will inherit the outcomes of today's environmental and political choices. Final conclusion: Greenland's story is not finished. It continues at the edge of ice and possibility, shaped by history, climate, and human decisions. What happens here matters far beyond the Arctic, because Greenland reflects a shared future where survival depends not on domination but on understanding, responsibility, foresight, cooperation, and respect for planetary limits for generations to come. Remember Greenland this way, as a quiet but powerful memory that stays with you long after this story ends. The Inuit survived because they listened to nature. They watched the ice, followed the animals, respected limits, and understood that survival in the Arctic was never about control. It was about balance. Their knowledge was built slowly, passed from elders to children, shaped by patience and humility. Because they listened, they endured. The Vikings failed because they ignored nature. They brought familiar systems into an unfamiliar land and expected the environment to adapt to them. They relied on strength, tradition, and certainty, but the Arctic demanded flexibility. When climate shifted and isolation grew, their way of life could not adjust. Their disappearance was quiet, but the lesson is clear. Modern Greenland stands between these two histories. It carries ancient knowledge and modern technology at the same time. It must protect culture while participating in global systems. It must pursue economic opportunity while defending fragile ecosystems. Greenland today is not choosing between past and future, it is learning to hold both. This is why Greenland matters, far beyond the Arctic. Its story reflects a global challenge. Humanity now faces environmental limits that cannot be ignored. Growth, power, and technology alone are not enough. Greenland teaches us that survival depends on listening to land, to climate, to history, and to one another. This is not just the history of an island, it is a lesson for the future we are all shaping together.